peace, love, and power. This is your boy Kansu Sheshmamoon right here with Team Osiris live on a Sunday night. And we have an interesting show today. Actually, this show was motivated by a lot of things. If you remember a while back, we did a show on Afrocentricity. It created a huge kickback. It was a lot of controversy coming out of that show. And we kind of want to do another one because we've had some recent chain of events. We've even had some individuals that have come across the scene that are talking about Afrocentricity and African-centered scholarship. And we kind of want to shed some light on that, some perspectives by delving into some subject matter, particularly language, migration, and the peoples of Western Sub-Saharan, and of course the Nile Valley, centered around things like that, language, culture, the arts of African people, and kind of get into the quantumization of Afrocentricity and some of the positive and negatives that are associated with it. The members of Team Osiris, which are Brother Heru, Brother Christopher, and Brother Melvin, has some unique perspectives on this subject matter. And so I'm definitely going to turn the floor over to them and let them bring some conjecture. We do have a certain subject matter from an individual by the name of Dr. Issa. I think his name is Dr. Jai Issa. I think I'm saying his name right. Forgive me if I'm not. That had some theories based on the fact that he happens to be a PhD scholar, and he's written a particular publication that deems him a scholar in a certain subject matter that is pretty much the platform of Afrocentricity. And we're here to kind of discourse that, have a talk about it. And hopefully this will open up to a dialogue between ourselves and Dr. Issa, maybe at a live capacity for the audience to be able to enjoy. Because we have a propensity here to have a certain opinion about your traditional scholar and traditional scientist who does not use a complete composite picture of scholarship, more so than just one faceted aspect of scholarship, such as an ethnic base and having an ethnocentric form of scholarship. We think that that's very disingenuous and not true to the human paradigm. But with that being said, let me turn the floor over to Brother Heru. Brother Heru, what's up, brother? How you be? Hold on, Brother Heru. I almost forgot. In tradition of Kansu, let me open the gateway for knowledge, wisdom, truth, justice, peace. Papa Legua, the opener of the way, bringing truth, freedom, and justice, knowledge and wisdom. Ashe. So, Brother Heru, the floor is yours. I digress.
All right, peace to the family. Just like Council was saying, this discussion tonight was brought about by, if I'm not mistaken, a post that I posted on my Facebook page. And not only that, this has been an ongoing issue for about a week with this what's his name, Dr. Issa. We were discussing how Egyptians and West African people are two different populations of people. We aren't the same people. There has been a lot of talk in the Afrocentric, should I say, the conscious community, that we are descendants of ancient Egyptians, or that we're connected with them, or that Egyptians migrated west and became today. I just want to say that's flat out not true. And tonight we're going to be discussing this a little bit. One thing we have to understand that people in West Africa and people that eventually went up to Egypt are two distinct populations of people. We got two different haplogroups. People in West Africa are primarily E1B1A, and people up in Egypt and Northern Africa are primarily E1B1B. These are distinct groups, distinct characteristics, and different language families connected. Our connection, or should I say West African connection, stems from 20 to 30,000 years ago down in what we would call like Ethiopia, South Sudan, before the population splits. At this time, that's when the particular populations went their separate ways. You have EP2, which is the ancestor to E1B1A and E1B1B. These populations split. One population went west through the Sahara, and the other population continued north of the Nile. And that's the first part of this real quick. If I can, I wanted to see if Chris could touch on the linguistics of the different population groups a little bit for a second. I yield the floor.
Yeah, say that again. I had two streams going on at one time. I apologize.
No, I just wanted to see if you can give a general overview of the language splits, the language phylum splits between the Afro-Asiatic and the Niger-Congo groups, or the Niger-Cadorfian groups.
Yeah, give me a second. I'm trying to pull something up. Hold on a second.
Well, while the brother's pulling some information, I want to bring some facets out. We've had, and as we look in history, what is considered an autodidactic person and a classically trained person. You hear a lot. One famous autodidactic in the Afrocentric community is John Henry Clarke. You hear a lot about John Henry Clarke being an autodidactic, which means you're self-taught in the field of scholarly works, things like history and science. You're self-taught, and you pull resources and are able to understand these things using basic methodology. And some of us have that ability, and it's been talked about throughout history. And then you have those that are classically trained. The biggest argument is what is called the W.E.B. Du Bois model, talented 10th by some who laugh at it, and the Booker T. Washington model, those that use cultural aspects to define African identity. And so these two things have created some controversy between the two, because there's been an ongoing battle as to what's the best way to recognize our identity in both of these models. And so, but the problem that's happening that I've noticed is an outright disrespect of our opinions in the scholarly world based on the ability to either belong or not belong to certain isolated groups that justify their own actions, but don't appeal to the world standard because of the sake of color or ethnic base. Now that's where ethnocentrism comes into play, where a lot of bigotry falls into play, because if you don't appeal to a certain group of people, you can be ostracized and your information can be deemed pseudo, or you're not deemed credible. However, you have just as much access to the same information that this person has. And that's where it causes a lot of disparaging arguments. One big one is Afro-Asiatic and Negro-Egyptian comparativeness when it comes to breaking down and assimilating the Medu-Neter. That is an ongoing argument that kind of started with Sheikh Diop and Theophile Benga at the UNESCO conference when discussing the Black dynastic theory. And they used the Medu-Neter and the particular language phylum to support the theory of in Black or an African civilization found exclusively in the Nile Valley. But it's just like this adage, old doesn't always necessarily mean better. Maybe at that time, the Black dynastic theory held a lot of weight. And I think that to a degree that Kemet was black. But I also know that there was an admixture in Kemet that made up the Nile Valley. And because of the modern technology that has gone into science, that has changed the methodology of how we discover things, we are starting to see that become more and more prevalent. As a matter of fact, take this analogy. If I took the Model T Ford, one of the earliest vehicles, does that mean because it was the oldest that it operates better than a 2016 Chevrolet? Absolutely not. More than likely, you're going to pick the 2016. It's a newer, quote unquote, vehicle. So old does not denote best. It just denotes that it's old, but things evolve into better things. So because Kemet was the oldest civilization, doesn't mean that it was in the position to be the best civilization, as evolution can dictate and change. So some of the factoids that we have involving Kemet does not mean that they hold true today, because Kemet is an ongoing study. So I want to again digress the floor for anyone to expand on those comments, because I think one of the major problems is the claim that older is better. So I'll open the floor to that aspect.
All right, this is brother Chris. I want to say peace to the panel. Team Osiris, we're on the horizon. We're rising. Peace to Team Offset. One of the things that I find confusing is that in the past, yes, there may have been a lot of European ethnocentrism going on. In fact, there was a lot of it going on. But some of those old arguments and some of those old debates, they're not even circulating in universities anymore. You know, some of those arguments are done. In fact, there's a counter to a book that, you know, had a lot of huge controversy. Our ancestor, the great, I have the utmost respect for him, Dr. Clark. He did a debate with an individual called Mary Letzkowitz, I believe that's her name, over a book, Black Athena. Now, scholarly, if you're going to, you know, do research, you know, if you're going to study arguments and things like that, you have to research and study both sides. So, you know, I did that. And one of the things is that a lot of people feel the need to, or what I feel a lot of Afrocentrics, they, especially us in America, have to feel a need that knowing that most of us come from West Africa or Central African backgrounds through slavery and things like that, we feel the need to latch on and try to connect with ancient Kemet and things like that, and or try to keep the argument that Europeans are trying to say that the ancient Egyptians were white people. That's not the case at all. Even in her book, the counter argument, they even state that, you know, the ancient Egyptians were Northeast Africans. You know, they would look obviously similar to people that you see there now, you know, Ethiopians, the Bija, you know, the Afar, even modern Egyptians that live there now. We have a brother, you know, he is more African than a lot of us on the panel, you know. So like Brother Consul was saying, there's a lot of arguments going on, or people keeping arguments that are outdated, that no one's even arguing. So, I mean, a lot of the old books, I mean, they're good and stuff, you know, but, you know, keep up with the most current and updated information. And I digress the floor.
Yes, sir. Yeah, anyone else want to touch on that facet?
Yeah, I know Melvin wants to get in, but yeah, I wanted to touch on a point that both of you guys made, especially Consul. You made an excellent point. A lot of what's going on in this conscious circle is people have a tendency, and it really seems that no matter what field of study that they're studying, they have a tendency to hinge on the past so much so that they ignore new up-to-date information and make the information that they're studying obsolete. We can find this in a lot of paradigms. We can find this in a more, obviously we're talking about the Kemet paradigm as of right now. We can also find this in a lot of the groups out here are hinging on old, out-of-date materials and works by old scholars and taking it like that's the end-all be-all. But they're missing one part of being a human, and that's always progressing and going forward. So some people have become stagnant and stuck in a certain particular way, and they won't go forward. And to me, you know, it's hurting them more than it's, you know what I'm saying, anything else. Because as things continue to go on and new information arises, then these people are going to continuously look more foolish as time goes on, because they refuse to let old ideologies go or old work go. You know, I was having a discussion about Dr. Ivan Van Sertima not too long ago, and how a lot of his information is outdated and would be considered pseudo by today's standards. I mean, you know, it is what it is. I mean, they were great scholars. They did the best they can do with the information that they had. But, you know, as us who are trying to come and fill their steps, we got to understand too that the new information and the better information that we're getting, we got to incorporate that into our understanding and our learning. And I yield the floor.
Yeah, well said, brother. Well said. Well, Heru, let's get into some actual meat. Let's get into some data. I think you had a recent discourse, and I think you want to kind of discuss the dynamics of this discourse to give, you know, some empirical evidence on what we're talking about and how this problem is perpetuated in this conscious community, because there is an issue with people that appeal to authority, which in, you know, the debate world, we're talking a logical fallacy here. We're talking when people that try to be persuasive appeal to an authority that kind of they can hide behind and act as if they're the actual authority and end all be all. Would you be willing to share that and kind of, you know, break the details down?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, what the brother's speaking on is, like I said, we had a conversation or a discourse with the brother Jahi Issa. Apparently, he feels that I'm not qualified and other people are not qualified to disseminate information because we don't have a PhD or a certain type of degree to his liking. I've never claimed to be a scholar, or I'm just a regular dude who just happens to take a liking to this particular topic. So he's under the impression that just because I don't have a PhD, that anything that I say is incorrect or is not qualified because I don't have it. Well, the thing is, a lot of the information that he has, even though he has a PhD, is not only outdated but incorrect. And just like Kansu said, he's using the appeal to authority fallacy to make himself be the end all be all. His information is pretty much, how should I say this? It's neglecting biology, it's neglecting science, and even linguistic data to prove his point. For some reason, he has it in his head that African Americans are descendants of ancient Egyptians, which is completely false. Which is what I was explaining at the beginning of the show when I was saying that there are definitely population splits, and we can trace this through human migration patterns. And also, if we look at genetics, we can break down the different mutations in the different haplogroups to come to a conclusion to show you that we are distinctly different populations of people. We are sub-Saharan African people, tropical forest people, whereas you get up north in North Africa where Egyptians will mostly be, these people are more adapted to a climate of dry and arid places, you know, from living in that region. So, I mean, typically you're going to have some differences. Also, biologically going to have some differences. So, you know, we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about that a little bit more into detail a little bit later. Then also, you got to keep in mind that with the ancient Egyptians, even though they were African, they weren't what we would call sub-Saharan African. Also, that place was a melting pot. There were different populations of people going in and out of Kemet because this was so you had people coming from the south, you had people coming in from the north, which would be out of the. So these people are in a genetic melting pot. So you have things constantly changing over time. What people fail to realize is you have different populations ruling during the dynastic period. And what ends up happening is people are taking certain portions of the dynastic period and trying to affix them and say that Kemet, for thousands of years, these were all the same type of people, which they were not. We can see through different avenues that there were different types of people in control at different points in times. We know about the Hyksos. They had control for a period of time. You had the indigenous people that were there in Kemet. They had control for a portion of time. You had people who came from the south, which would be people that would favor our particular group of people, sub-Saharan people. They had control at certain points of time. We're going to get to that in greater detail more on the show. But I also wanted to give Brother Melvin a chance to say a couple words, because I know he wanted to speak on this too.
Yeah, I do want to address some things collectively. It's not just Brother Issa. You have some others who feel like qualifications by their standards or certain academic routes that you need to take in order to show that you properly understand something. That's sort of, like you said, an appeal to authority. But the reason why is what I really want to touch on. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, cool. Most of this starts in what the topic of today is Afrocentricity, Pan-African scholarship. And this originates from specifically Egypt, which I want to talk about, is when a lot of European or German scholars, they were the first ones to go over there to bring out information pertaining to linguistics and anthropology. I think Brother Chris can vouch for that as well. So most of these people, when they went over there and they saw who these people were, they brought that information out first. You do have some who were pretty biased, and so they said, okay, well, now these people are European Egyptians. They're not like Egyptians, they're European Egyptians. And so they typically do what we call whitewashing, and they just whitewash the entire people of their land. And we know today that is scientifically incorrect as well as historically. But the process of proving that had to be corrected through the Afrocentric paradigm. It took them meaning our quote unquote master teachers, Dr. Ben, Chikante Diop, Theophilo Banga, T.M. James, and many, many others, John Henry Clark, that vouched for the quote unquote Africanness or blackness of those people. And so it's sort of like they're countering Eurocentricity with Afrocentricity. And when they did it in its inception, it was right. It was them correcting information that was misrepresented by people there. And that was a good thing. But now you have in 2016, people still taking that approach. People still taking the Afrocentric approach to new information or to new methodology. And so to properly define who those people are, you can't just look at phenotypes. You can't really just look at anthropology, because if you just look at anthropology and try to label people based upon the features of the skeleton, you're going to get to a pseudo lane. You have to use genetics and biology to properly determine who these people are. And we all know genetics and biology is not always perfect, which is why you do more testing to validate that. But genetics and biology kills a lot of the arguments from the Afrocentric and Eurocentric scholars, because it shows you that the people in that land are very, very diverse. It tells you where they came from, tells you where the languages they come from, and who people they come from, as well as people that intermix with them during certain periods of time. This is what genetics and biology teaches you. The problem we have today, especially in this community, is certain scholars who put in so many years of work to get a PhD, or who sat by certain master teachers' streets, they feel that they still need to continue the process of Afrocentricity to defend something that never was in the first place. And so we being Team Osiris, we deal with science, we deal with biology, we deal with genetics. Brother Amir Ngozi, we all know that's his lane, that's his thing. He does that. About the genetics of these people, a lot of people get bent out of shape. We saw that on the show when Kansu and Ngozi were on there, and Dr. Issa told Ngozi he was wrong. And of course, we have the data to back that up, but we're going to write a paper on that and let the people see that for themselves. But the problem is that biology does not support the socio-political agenda that Johnny Ricard, Dr. Ben, Chikati Diop, Theophilo Benga, G.M. James had, which was Afrocentricity or Pan-Africanism. And it's because of that that modern day scholars will not support anything dealing with biology unless it supports their agenda. They won't deal with anything concerning genetics unless it supports their agenda. Even when you talk about migrations or linguistics, they won't support it because it does not fit their agenda to completely blackwash what they suppose was whitewashed. And we're saying, to Osiris, we're saying all of that is wrong. And that's the problem we're going to have. You're going to continue to bump heads with people in this community because they have a particular agenda. You know, especially if they've been through a certain educational field where it's not mainstream. Nobody mainstream talks about New Egyptian language. Nobody mainstream talks about how super black the Egyptians were. They completely use genetics and biology, which is new methodology, to approve or disprove certain claims, and they move on. And our people, for some reason, don't accept that because it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with what makes us comfortable.
Well, can I say something? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
No, I'm really sorry, Africa. This is really quick. Melvin, this goes exactly what you said, and a lot of arguments are. It's a baseless argument. There's no argument to begin with. For one, if I don't care who you are, if everybody in the Afrocentric community, if they're saying that the ancient Egyptian language, if it has been deciphered, and if they, I don't care what teacher you are, if in the world, if you teach the Egyptian language, then the definitive dictionary for the Egyptian language is the Walter Bush Dictionary. The Walter Bush Dictionary was written by a German individual, this German man, and with the help of others, compiled from Old Egyptian, right before Coptic, from Old Egyptian up until Demotic. They have compiled every word that could be found on any monument, papyrus, or whatever, right? So this is funny. Now, if there's this whitewashing, if there's this big conspiracy going on, then why would this individual, Adolf Ehrman, say this in his book, Life in Ancient Egypt? And it's page 32. If there's some huge conspiracy to say that the ancient Egyptians are not African people, please explain this to me by the individual that wrote the Egyptian dictionaries that all of you use. The inhabitants of Libya, Egypt, and Ethiopia have probably belonged to the same race since prehistoric times. In physical structure, they are still Africans, though in later times they have adopted an Asiatic language. No one can say how long they have used kindred dialects. It may be these proceeded from the one language they originally possessed, or it is quite possible that one of these races imposed their tongue on the others, or they may have been derived from a tribe of which we have never heard, considering how little we know of the Egypto-Semitic speech, Afro-Asiatic speech. So they go on, he goes on and, explains that, the ancient Egyptians were African people. And I don't care who you are. If you subscribe to the Medu Neter, then you have to accept the fact that the Medu Neter has Cushitic and other African aspects of the language, and it also has Semitic aspects of the language. You cannot deny this. You have Semitic speakers in Ethiopia who speak Amharic, Tigray. Ethiopia is at the Horn of Africa. From a boat, you could get to Yemen. There's Semitic speakers also. You have Semitic speakers in the Middle East. So all that is dead. People arguing a baseless argument. So I just wanted to say that, that this German even said this, and this was probably like 1854, 1864. So, I mean, come on.
Yeah, you're right. I think Sister Nefekai had something to say.
Yeah, I did. I really just think this is what a lot of this stuff boils down to. And what it really boils down to is that a lot of this information is fucking with people's livelihoods. So at the end of the day, if you're making money off of a book that you wrote, you're going to say, if someone comes and challenges that information, then of course you're going to say that the information that they're giving is wrong. Now, the funny thing and the very hypocritical thing about Dr. Issa, right, when I watched the Joel Benjamin show, was that he went on the show to try to defend Asar Imhotep and say that Asar basically was able to break linguistics because he was self-taught, even though his field of study is not in linguistics, right? He went on and on, whole long drawn out monologue about the shit. But then when Haru asked him certain questions, he said, "You're not qualified to speak for Afrocentrism. You're not qualified because you don't have this PhD." So what I like to know is, how the hell do you go on a show defending somebody who does not have a degree in linguistics, right? His field of study is not linguistics, say that it's okay for him to be self-taught and that he's been vetted by all of these supposed scholars. But then when someone else comes along who has information that challenges your information because you say that person's not qualified based on the fact that they don't have a book or they don't have a degree, that they're not qualified to speak or challenge anything that you say. That's so damn hypocritical. The truth of the matter is, somebody came along, they bodied what you were saying, and because you have a PhD, you want to wave that around like that actually, not to say it doesn't mean anything, but that just automatically disqualifies anybody from challenging what the hell you have to say. Like, I don't get that. So the truth of the matter is, when it comes to this whole topic, everybody's going to continue to get heat as long as you challenge it, because you have people who are making their livelihoods off of this information. They're doing lectures, they're doing tours, they're writing books, all of that stuff. They have a following and a fan based off of this feel-good information. You're going to get a lot of pushback from it. And that's what it all boils down to. It's not about misinforming the people and trying to be noble and do something. It has nothing to do with anything noble, has nothing to do with any kind of humility. All it comes down to is dollars and cents. And that's the long and short of it.
And you make a very valid point, which is why I coined the term book hustlers. And I do agree with you 100%. But I think his problem with Heru wasn't necessarily that he's not self-taught. Even though he said that, in the manner in which Heru approached him, which is with the biological data.
I didn't say that. I didn't say Haru was self-taught. He went when Dr. Issa was
I'm saying that
show. He said that.
I'm saying that Issa said. No, I'm saying that Issa said because Heru is not qualified, and qualifications must get a pass when you're talking about a self-taught scholar. Because he gave, like you said, he gave Asar a pass, and he's self-taught. He's what's the word? Autodidactic, something like that. But yeah, so my thing is that the way Heru approached them was with valid, non-biased information, specifically biological information, and that goes against the agenda. It goes against whatever he's trying to make money off of, definitely, but it goes against the agenda of being quote unquote Pan-Africans, because it shows that those people don't come from that region. There's no connection other than some historical gathering of those people. There's no genetic connection. Those aren't the same people. Not over, if anybody knows evolution, not over that much period of time separation from that region are those people still the same. They have ancestry, but they're still not the same people.
Are you there, Mel?
Yeah, man.
Oh, okay, I thought we lost you.
Nah.
The rest of the panel, are you still there?
Yeah, we're still here.
Oh, okay.
I just want to know what's wrong with that. Like, what's wrong with not being descended from that region? What's wrong with that? I don't get it. Like, why are we fighting so hard to say we come from here? Why?
Like you said,
I mean,
I think it's just because it's marketable. Everybody knows Egypt is the quote unquote land of gold, so it's easy to market it in a book or a movie or a picture. So
Hey,
I
but,
think it plays into your point. They're making a living off of it.
but remember that time in like the I think maybe it was like maybe like the late 1860s, 1890s, early 20th century, that whole Egyptomania shit was going on. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I
Right.
know for a fact back then, you know what I'm saying, and I have a book, The History of the Shriners. It goes from 1893, the history from 1893 to 1993, and they have a degree called the Daughters of Isis. So you know, we were bit by the Egyptian bug too, you know, back then. And at that time, you know, Egypt was the all and be all of all civilizations, you know. So of course for us, and knowing that, you know, that area is Africa, you know, we latched onto it, you know. It was some feel good shit. I mean, it helped a lot of people, but at the end of the day, from where we got now, I mean, we just got to be honest and keep it moving.
Yeah, and something else, Chris. You know, most of it is being used to repel what happened years ago here in America. Most people don't like that attachment to us as a people, what happened in slavery, when we were sold or kidnapped. So most people, to avoid that, they say our history doesn't start 500 years ago. It starts 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago. Instead of, you know, instead of admitting, okay, this happened, but we can move on, you want to go further back in history, find something that makes you comfortable, that makes you at the peak of your existence in humanity, and cling on to that. Psychologically, that tells me something that's definitely going wrong, and that you're not living in the present right now because you're fantasizing or dreaming about something, and it won't ever happen again.
Exactly.
But my thing about it is this: latching on to Kemet shouldn't make you feel good, because one of the things that I say is that even if you could trace your lineage back that far back and say that you descended from some of those people, the truth of the matter is there's a very strong likelihood that you're not descended from the people that you want to be descended from. You will be descended from a regular person who was probably illiterate, who probably was a servant or some kind of, you know what I'm saying? Like, it wouldn't have been what you thought. Everybody wasn't walking around royalty. The majority of the population was illiterate and uneducated. That was the truth. So even then, there's still romanticism in that people actually think that everyone in Kemet was royalty. That's not true at all.
I'm glad you said that, Nefrakal.
Yeah, that's facts.
Because let's be honest, for real. All that, I get it. It feels good, you know, and I sometimes I say it as a, you know, a term of endearment or respect. You know what I mean? You know, hey, what's up, king? You know, what's up, queen? Everybody was not no damn kings and queens back in the day. You know what I'm saying? Cut it out. You know, and like Nefrakal said, you know, most of us, I mean, you probably would not have been a descendant of royalty. Nobody in Egypt, everybody was not walking around descendants of royalty in Egypt. A lot of the people were running around fucking butt naked. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't, you know, a lot of people couldn't read straight up. Like probably like 1% of the whole population could read, you know? Everybody wasn't going around abiding by the 42 laws of Ma'at. They couldn't read, you know, they weren't, I mean, unless you were part of that royal society, that circle, you know, you weren't a part of it, you know?
Because everybody believe in that. You know what I'm saying? You had a lot of grave robbing going on, a lot of people desecrating tombs. If they really abided by the 42 laws of Ma'at, they would never do something like that. But you had people who
They didn't know them to abide by them.
That's
they
what
didn't
I'm
know
saying.
that
Right.
information.
That's a foreign belief system.
That's what I'm saying. You got people who didn't give a damn about that. So I mean, to sit there and propagate that everybody was on this one accord, and it wasn't like that. That's not what it was.
And let me clear one thing up too for people who, if you want to argue this, well, at some point they had a lot of, mass coffins, and people had, certain the per rules and things like that, and these texts. Again, these people have money. These weren't your regular ass people. So let's stop playing games. You know what I mean? Like, for real. If you weren't a part of that elite or royal family, you probably didn't know any of this shit. You probably just, worship, whatever animal cult, you know what I mean, what it was. And I mean, you did what you did to do what you do, it was what it was.
Y'all hear me?
Yeah, man, you good?
Yeah, we got you.
I found the initial post. I found the initial post that Dr. Issa disagreed with. I posted this Friday, and I'm reading from the exact post. What I did was I made a statement, and I put a map of West Africa up, and what I said was, we are not Egyptians. Sorry, I have much love and respect for Kemet, but I think we neglect West Africa way too much. It's time for us to return to our ancestral home, study the rich, beautiful history and people of West Africa. We name everything in the Nile Valley, but if you ask the so-called average conscious person about West Africa, you'll more than likely hear crickets. I won't deny our people's connection to East Africa, but we as African Americans aren't descendants of Egyptians. Our people were in West Africa 12,000 plus years ago, way before the dynastic periods of Kemet. Couple comments in, he made a statement and said not true, and I asked the good doctor to edify me if I'm incorrect. And his response was, well, I did that on the video in my book. And I informed the doctor that I had never been in a video with him, and I don't have his book. And a good reason I don't have his book is, A, I didn't know about it until he said something about it. And two, even if I did want to entertain or attempt to get his book is overpriced. It's 95 pages and it's overpriced. The cheapest I've seen his book is $168, and that's the cheapest, all the way up to $5,485. I saw this on Amazon. I did contact him privately and asked him, did he have any copies of his book? And he said he was selling them for $35, which I think is still a little bit expensive for a 95-page book. I've got Dr. Ben books that cost $5 to $12 brand new. And he has a lot more information, I'm sure, than Dr. Issa would have in his book talking about Amen, or the linguistic origin of Amen, or something like that. So this is where part of this stems from. And then we had a show about a week or two ago on Joel Benjamin. And as Melvin had stated before, Dr. Issa, he was in contentions with some comments made. And the best he could say was, oh, you're incorrect. But he never provided any information to counter the information that we were saying. Anything that was of significance anyway. His position was the same as he took with me. You don't have a PhD, so you're not qualified. And he runs. And he did the exact same thing on my post. You're not qualified. You're not qualified. And he left. We didn't even get to have a dialogue. I asked the brother to post an excerpt from his book to prove that African Americans are descended from ancient Egyptians. He never responded. Instead, I found out he deletes me and he just runs off the post. So this is the thing. You got people making these wild, loose assertions and claims, and then trying to appeal to authority using these fallacies. But at the end of the day, they have not provided any documentation, any evidence, anything that would say that African Americans are descendants of Egyptians at all. And this is a big problem, because in this community, only this community where you can make these wild and loose claims and just walk away with it and not have to answer for them. And we can no longer stand for this kind of, we just can't tolerate this anymore.
Hey, Rue.
Yeah.
Hey, Ru, hold on. Somebody in the chat just said Greece is Europe's classical civilization because they based their social and political structure from those civilizations. I mean, if I say your name wrong, I apologize. Naomi Ubuntu. Okay, now look, this is my thing with that.
Oh, that's Nyame.
Okay, yeah. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I agree with that. You know, the equivalent for us Africans of a classical civilization for us, as well as how Europeans, you know, how they look to Greece. No, we should look to ancient Egypt like that in Kemet. You know, that is excellent. You know what I mean? That's good. You know, that gives us pride in being who we are. But you know, you don't see Europeans running around dressing half naked like Greeks. You know, they're not running around, you know, they're all not running around trying to speak ancient Greek. Do you know what I mean? You know, they're well established and planted in the real world moving forward while we're going ass backwards, you know, trying to live like it's 2500 BCE or something, you know? So, I mean, like, no, like, so we're not, I don't, yeah, like, I'm glad that was brought up, you know, because we're not saying not to look to Kemet in that aspect, you know, like, do that, but no.
Absolutely.
You know, I want to shed some light on something on the dynamics of this discussion. When we talk about Afrocentric scholars, we are really only talking about a chosen few of hundreds of them that happen to become popular. We're talking about Ivan van Sertima. We're talking about Sheikh Anta Diop. We're talking about Dr. Ben Yelkanin. We're talking about John Henry Clark. We're talking about Asa Hilliard. We're talking about people of that ilk. Chancellor Williams. We're talking about a select few that had the ability to grab the attention of people at the right time. These types of works have always been published. Mind you, these works are self-published because of the lack of support that they received from their peers because they weren't able to. It wasn't that the work wasn't valid, they just weren't able to. Okay? And when we talk about it upon the world scale, some of the information is not accurate, but that's all information. Everything's not going to be accurate to a T. You're going to have some things that are arguable, some things that can stand the test of time. But as time goes by, some of those things are going to fall by the wayside. I think there's any kind of scholar. But the problem lies is the ignorance of the bigger picture. When we talk about Kemet, and we're going to use Kemet as an example, Kemet would not be considered, only to those who are enthusiasts, as the classical civilization to represent all of Africa. That would be an out and outright disrespect to the entire continent of Africa and other continental Africans. There are continental Africans with 10,000 years of history that never knew anything about Kemet. Exactly. Some of them still don't to this day. So yes, we can't, as African peoples with a diversified culture that we do have, to lose ourselves in conspiracy theorism, thinking without logic that our entire paradigm came from the Nile Valley. It was a monolithic civilization, but it was compromised with diverse groups of people, particularly 42 nomes that ultimately became popular within that region. But Kemet is not the end-all be-all. Just like the namesake that the brother who posted in the back chat, who I know, very good brother, Nyame Ubuntu, the name Nyame is old as Kemet, if not older. In older form, not literal cognate, but form of the word God. It is not the literal cognate of God in linguistics. It invokes the same mentality in neurolinguistics.
Yep.
So it's a different overlay, and we have to respect the fact that Western civilization is our direct tie to our ancestral past. Now, mind you, when John Henry Clark and those great scholars, doing the best they could with the tools they had, did not have the technology of genetics.
Right.
They had some archaeological aspects, as Sheikh Anta Diop went into, but they did not have a clear-cut picture of their genetic tree. and also their genetic phylum to support a language cluster. So the Negro-Egyptian argument is a dated argument. And this is why a scholar like Mr. John Claude Mboli cannot truly hang on to the Obenga model. He had to modify it. Yep. And in doing that, he isolated himself to his own opinion. And this is why he don't have the peer support that he has, because there's no justification to the modern comparative model that claims that Meta is a sister language of the Negro-Egyptian language phylum. So we have to look at things from a composite picture. There's a lot of, and Melvin hit it right on the head, a lot of social political quantumization that's going on in the distribution of this knowledge. And to put it in layman terms for those that are listening who didn't quite understand what I just said, I'm speaking to what the Queen Neferka is speaking to. This is messing with people's pockets. And it was messing with people's pockets back then. This is why scholars like Dr. Ben and all of those brothers had to self-publish their books, because they were eating off of their books. It wasn't as if those books were done out of terms of endearment. You had to pay for those books. You had to pay for their lectures. And you paid a good penny for them at that time, comparatively speaking.
Right.
Consul, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to make a statement. And other than the socio-political, because at that point that is obvious, but you also have the agenda of neglecting newer information. Like in 2016, we have, especially with the internet, we have so much access to new information by scientists who put in years of work and have decided to publish their work, produce their work for the public to see for free. So you have genetic information and biological information, papers that these doctors have put out for free for the public to use and to digress upon. I'm saying that a lot of these scholars are completely tossing all of that work, all of the new methodology, because we like to bring up methodology, but we can't find ourselves to say that John Henry Clark's methodology is ancient. We can't find ourselves to say that Dr. Ben and Issa Elliott and D.M. James and all of their work, methodology was ancient. We can't say that. Even though we live in 2016, but we have new methods to test people and find out their identity. That's the problem we're having.
And I think too, and I'm sorry, Chris, I know you want to say something. I think too that when you say that, people think that you're kind of disrespecting what these men did, and that's not the case. They did what they could for that time, and if they didn't do what they could at that time, we wouldn't be having these discussions right now.
Right.
And that's the whole point of this. The next generation of people are supposed to bring something new to the table. They should be there should be information that comes along that makes that information outdated. Because back then, people weren't even talking about the kinds of things that Dr. Ben and Ivan Van Sertima and John Henry Clark were talking about. They weren't. So at the end of the day, this isn't a disrespect to them. There would be none of us if it were not for them. We wouldn't be even talking about newer information if we didn't have that information that inspired us to keep talking about these things and digging for deeper information. So this isn't a disrespect. It's actually honoring the elders by being able to put something new on the table and improve upon the works that they did.
Facts.
Saying that without ego or trying to say that they're wrong or anything like that. That's how you honor your elders. When you take something that they did and you make it, you improve upon it and give it to the people so that the generations that come after you can improve upon that.
Facts.
So, for all of those people who were watching and probably mad and how could they talk about the great this one and the great that one? We're honoring those people by doing that.
Exactly.
And time, that's what they will want us to do, honestly.
Yep. And one of my things too is that, I'm not just speaking I just came out here to the public and, I'm just, Afrocentric this. No, I was in there, caught up in it. you know, caught up in the whole shit. You know what I mean? I like that feel good stuff. You know what I mean? You know, the almighty black man God, you know, and everybody, you know, everybody else saying black, you know, you're subhuman and all that crazy shit. But, you know, one of the issues that I have a lot is that, you know, people will post up, you know, books like this. I have it too. This is by, and no disrespect to this brother at all, because, you know, respect to anybody that ever does the work, respect to anybody, but don't go around showing books and doing all this, showing and proving to the community when you're speaking to people that are not experts in the field whatsoever, but the actual experts in the field, in the world, in higher academia. You're not challenging them. You're not saying nothing to them. You know, so this is a book that someone showed. You know, the name's not worth mentioning, so I'm not gonna say his name. But this is by Muba Binga Bololo, and you know he does some comparisons with the Shaluba language in the Medu Neter. And one of the things in the book, which I'm not going to show the page, but you know, he compares Shaluba and Coptic too. In certain things, like, you know, I would personally call it fringe work, because if all this stuff is going on linguistically and stuff, right, then why is it not being presented in the top universities around the world, and why are not the experts in the fields of linguistics and of the Medu Neter language, which a lot of people base Negro Egyptian and things like that off, why is it not being challenged? I mean, this is one of the most updated books, period, so far right now by James P. Allen, and he gives a complete breakdown from Old Egyptian up till Demotic, right before he gives a breakdown from Old Egyptian up to Coptic, from all of its subgroups, its different regional dialects. I mean, why is this not being challenged? Why is the Afrocentric community not challenging this stuff? And like you said, you know, why are they running around with old school works in the logical fallacy of appealing to authority?
Yeah, I think partially because it's lazy scholarship. I hate to offend those people who put in that work, but let's be honest. By trying to reuse or remodel ancient, you know, works or ancient classifications, you know, you're showing that you're not willing to put in the legwork. A lot of these older scholars and master teachers actually had to take trips. They actually had to get their feet wet. And so we have the luxury not to be able to relay this information and not have to actually go take a trip to validate something. And I think a lot of people are taking advantage of that. They're using their own bias and socio-political views to say, let's stick with this, or let's use this classification when mainstream academics, it's not even considered a hypothesis. It's just usually pseudo, or like Chris says, friends work. And I think it's just lazy scholarship.
Hey Mel, I don't want to cut your wisdom, but that what you saying kind of ties into a little bit something Consul was saying earlier about the conspiracy theory aspect of this whole thing, because there within the conscious community, there is this conspiracy thing where people like to say, well, mainstream academia is not doing this or not doing that, so they're hiding something. They know the truth, but they're not letting it out. You know, that they have this thing in their head, but they don't understand that with all the technological advancements and the science that we're dealing with, you have a lot of information that is available, and the reason that they're not using it is because it's not correct or it's fringe work, and that's just what it is. The work that they're coming out with, the stuff that they're talking about, it really has no basis and it serves no purpose other than feel good material, and that's just what it is.
Hey,
I mean, I no other way to say.
Right. Really quickly, I want to address this. You know, what you were saying earlier about them having a conspiracy theory. Well, the conspiracy theory comes from trying to blackwash what was whitewashed. It comes out of fear of that, because you remember there were certain European and German scholars and researchers that whitewashed information. And they were wrong in their doing that. And so we have Afrocentric scholars, Pan-African scholars, they come back and they recorrect it. But we've gotten so far from recorrecting that we're blackwashing everything. So we're acting like the very oppressor who came before us. And the whole fear of conspiracy theory comes out of that. The conspiracy theory has no place in 2016. You can validate or not validate that information. It's pointless to use a conspiracy theory when you can validate it. There's methods to prove that.
One thing I want to do really quickly, I want to share my screen quickly here. We try to do the best that we can to provide empirical data when we digress on the subject. Can everybody see my screen at this moment?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we talk about primary research. This is something that we talked about. This is a PowerPoint that, Team Osiris had presented a while back, a few months back. And what we talked about is what is primary research. Now, these are guidelines that are based on scholastic standard. And the thing about ethnocentric scholarship is that it tends to be rhetorical. It doesn't actually adhere to the standard of what is scholarship traditionally until they're challenged. Then they expect you to uphold those standards. But in ascertaining their own research, they actually contradict their own standard. Because when you talk about what is primary research, it's any type of research that you go out and collect yourself. Number one, that's primary research. Okay? Examples include surveys, interviews, observations, and ethnographic research. The key word here is ethnographic research. I want everybody to do a little work themselves. Look up ethnographic research. That is the primary reason why a discussion like, can the Medunetta be deciphered, gets quite clear that is an asinine argument because of the term ethnographic. Because when you research something ethnographically, you have to also get into the culture. You can't just take historiological data from simple sources like archaeology. You actually have to go and do field research and talk to the people that you are talking about. If those people are extinct, guess what? There's no clear-cut consensus. You'd have to leave it open. You can't come with a blanket statement saying something is if the article is about people and those people are extinct. So a good researcher knows how to use both primary and secondary resources in his or her writing to integrate them in a cohesive fashion. So that means that you know that you can't take just primary research from an African perspective in the land of Africa, especially in the Nile Valley, because it sits on tectonic plates that would also show fact that we had an admixture, particularly coming from Asia and the Middle East going through the Suez Canal and the Sinai Canal as well. So conducting primary research is a useful skill to acquire as it can greatly supplement your researches in secondary sources. So as we had talked about this early on, as I'll kind of go, I'm just scanning through this. What types of primary research can be done? Interviews, surveys, observations, and analyses have to be done to give a strong primary account. If you're just telling me something historiologically and you do not take into accord biological history, linguistical history, archaeological history, surveys to see what's going on today, to link today into historical cognate, and then analyze those things to come up with a summary, you are not being forthright with your comings. So you have to really make sure that you understand that. And this is why I want to kind of put those up there, because we kind of touched on this before. And a lot of people think that we're just attacking or being opportunists. No, we're holding people to the standard that they claim they have. If you tell me to submit a paper to validate my knowledge base, submit the paper to who? A certain group or guild of people that are politically put together to determine whether my paper is credible or not? See, these are the kind of things that we have to take into accord when these so-called scholars come about. Because what was the regulatory body that regulated the work of Dr. Ben?
Right.
Who did Dr. Ben submit his work to for peer review? Just think about that. And I love Dr. Ben. My favorite book of all time is Stolen Legacy by G.M. James. Unfortunately, Mark Bernal came along, and the rest is history.
Yep.
And it hurt me, but it's the facts. Okay? So, who peer reviewed John Henry Clark's work?
Hey, Kansu, I want to say something real quick. I want to
Go ahead. This is an open floor, brother. Go ahead, bro.
But I want to make sure that people understand. You just said something real powerful there. That G.M. James Stolen Legacy is your favorite book, which that's a book I have too, one of my favorites also. And you said that it hurt you when it got destroyed or whatever, right? Now, this is the thing. This is what separates real learners from people who want to remain stagnant. Somebody who's really about the information and really they understand that things change. Everything is not going to be the same. Even if something they want to be true, it's not true anymore. You know, they understand that. You gotta let it go. Over these past few years, I've gotten everything that I thought was great and good destroyed, and it is what it is. But me, you know, switching from being a stagnant person to understanding how information works and how humans work. You know, sometimes you gotta let stuff go. You gotta go forward. I mean, if the information is there and the evidence is there, then you gotta take it to what it is. The problem is a lot of people have cognitive dissonance and they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with getting their illusions destroyed. And that's why part of the reason we're having this conversation now. Because the problem is Team Osiris for the last 6 months, we've been destroying a lot of stuff that people thought was true or they want to be true. And these people are having problems. And at us, I don't even want to say attacking us because I'm not no victim and I don't want us to play no victim because we're not. But you got people coming at us because they can't handle the fact that a lot of the information that they deal with is out of date, pseudo, dumb.
Right. And that's why they call us multicultural. Exactly what they call us.
They giving us all names. They telling us we this. They telling us we that we that.
And we integrationists.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, Team Osiris, we on record, all of the members, we are definitely for Afrocentricity, but not so much so that we're gonna skew the data or try to make it look a certain way, or we're trying to blackwash anything. You know, we are very much African centered, and we've maintained that the whole entire time. You know, we got all these other rumors and all these labels coming from other people. We don't support integration. I heard my brother Kansu say it. I've heard everybody else on this panel say it. That's not something that we pushing. But people are giving us these titles because we're destroying people's illusions. We're messing with people's pockets. It's not that we're necessarily trying to mess with people's pockets, but unfortunately, information is coming, and that's what this really boils down to. That's part of the reason. That's why we're having this conversation. Because people want to live in la la land and not deal with reality. And Melvin, you want to finish your point? Or Consul, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So what we're doing, and this is kind of an introduction, it's a part 2 to the first show that we did about Afrocentricity. A lot of controversy came out of it because we were taking the same steps that John Henry Clark made, that Sheikh Anta Diop made. They were not in the same vein as Booker T's and W.B. Du Bois's and Patrice Lumumba or anyone else that came. I'm sorry, not Patrice Lumumba, he's modern, but people that came before them. They had to take a step out and allow themselves to be criticized, and that's what we're doing. We're breaking the mold because we have to. We have challenges in 2016 that are totally different than the challenges of 1968. They're polarized because we still deal with white supremacy and in scholarship, but we also have to deal with the rationale of dealing with world history. Study world history. Don't isolate yourself to just an African lens. Open your mind to world history, because we're dealing in facets of world history. Africa is the oldest continent. However, there are other continents on the planet. Use your logical thinking here. Also, be aware of your own continental history and understand what the land that you stand on. And so in the next coming shows, these are going to be subsets of Afrocentricity, and we're going to delve into a lot of things. We're going to delve into original religion, original African spirituality. What is it really? Atheism. We're going to delve into the West African paradigm, understanding Yoruba ties, the Congo ties, how that ties us in as non-white people, how a lot of people have a misconception of certain ethnic people like the Dominican people, the Ecuadorian people, the Cuban people, the Puerto Rican people, the Mexican people, how we have the appearance because of a lot of modern day misunderstandings that have occurred today, that those are not African cognate. But if you find out their spiritual background, you will see all of their spirituality comes from the Congo, which is on the continent of Africa, which makes them African, because that's a cultural byproduct. You have to study the people of a land in order to get to the science, because the people came before the science did. The people recorded the science, and then that science was then passed down. There's different types of science. You go into your natural archaic science, and then you come into your modern day science. Those are two different methodologies. And so we got to give light to that, because it's causing a disparage in our communities, and our communities being taken advantage of, because we're dealing with dated information, 10-year-old books. You can't go off 10-year-old books on data that's evolving down there every day. Remember this, Kemet, as far as archaeology, now that's just one aspect of studying Kemet, but Kemet is almost less than 1% excavated. Let me ask, and I'm going to ask a facetious question because I already know it, but I want the brother, because he mentions it all the time. Brother Heru, explain to the audience about Abu Simbel. What makes Abu Simbel so unique?
Oh, well, you know, it's going to upset some people too. But
oh man, you breaking up, brother. I want them to hear this. You breaking up.
No, can you hear me now?
There you go. There you go.
No, I was saying much cut Abu Simbel up and moved it from his original location.
Wait a minute.
So
they cut Abu Simbel up. What do you mean by they cut Abu Simbel up?
They went in there and they physically took machines and they cut the monument up into pieces and they moved it to a location. And there are photos of this occurrence happening.
Is this the only monument that's been done like this in Kemet?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You
Wow.
have Egyptian monuments all over the world. As a matter of fact,
That's the whole sorry to cut you off, the whole Egyptian wing of the Natural History Museum in New York. Yep. They have a whole wing, and all it is just cut up monuments and tombs that they have on display. So
even let's be real with this too. Even when you go and visit some of the temples and you see some of the stuff, some of the statues posted up on the wall, a lot of that stuff was not originally in those temples. So they have no correlation with the temple itself. And so you have to ask yourself, why is this here? Who did this? And you understand tourism, you understand finance, you understand that the shifting of this helps the temple become a marker for tourism and people to come to pay and visit the temple. So you understand that they've already totally disrespected the culture.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Even coming from a spiritual aspect, a religious aspect. Me studying, I'm actually an active Babalawo, and Palero, Tata, and Palomayambe, and Ifa. Okay, those artifacts that you find in Kemet, there is a cognate from Yoruban religion to the religion of the Nile Valley. There's a direct cognate there. These are the same people practicing a different polarity of religion. Well, for those who don't understand, those artifacts mean more to modern people than they did back then. These were just operational tools that were used for relativity. They were making bowls and things like that. The bowl in Africa is a symbol. It's actually symbolic of the mind. In Ifa, we call it the Odu. Okay, so that represents the mentality of a person. So it gives you an idea of how these people were actually thinking, and they weren't jungle thinking people who are just primal. They weren't thinking like that. So these monuments that people idolize in Kemet to this day, people weren't idolizing them like that. These were functional symbols because Kemet is right here to the inhabitants. This is why they don't get, they're not fanatical about it in Africa, or you would see them fighting the Arabs that overtook it, if that was the case. So that's not the case. It's the sensationalism by it because of how it's marketed in America with a Roman model, the Roman business model, the West. When your mind is dead in Kemet, they called it resting when you would die. When the soul would leave your body, the Khan Ba separating, you would be considered resting. So that thought was attributed to death or calcification of the mind. These kind of terms, through transmogrification, through morphology, through phonetics, changed into a modern language. And that modern language gave you modern thought. But it was one in the same. That's how easy knowledge and information can be transposed. That's why it's very, very important to realize you're worshiping Kemet, but those that are Afrocentric, but the Caucasian you demoralize moved the temple over for you to walk into, that you won't crack for walking in. I've been to this temple 62 times. Yeah, the temple that the cracker moved for you to walk in. So what makes you think they didn't tamper with it while they were moving it? They just left it in its pristine, huh? Some aspects of Medunetta, if we study the Medunetta, this is just one subject matter, but if we study the Medunetta, we tend to find out it was less dependent upon being spoken. Just based on the way that it's set up. You look at Nopta Playa. That was a time clock that didn't have instructions openly. You had to be initiated into understanding that nomenclature. So when we start talking about these languages and these ways of these certain culture, you have to get into the intimate lives of the literal people. You got to go talk to the Beja and find out who they were relative to get an understanding of what an Egyptian is. These kind of facts, these little quantum things mean a whole lot to an ignorant person when you don't reveal that aspect to them, when you purposely hide it. When you just do you create a general term, you blackwash it, and you sell it as a complete body of work. That's not a complete body of work. You know it's not. The public just doesn't. So it's important that we hold a responsibility to the people that we teach to.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to close out, but I want to leave the floor in closing out. I want to open the floor up. So go ahead, Arun.
I was gonna say you said something else that was powerful too, about them picking up and moving it. You know what I'm saying? So we know that people are tampering with everything. I mean, the mere fact, don't get me wrong, it's good scientifically that we are able to examine these artifacts, or that we are able to extract samples and find out the genetics of these particular people or certain persons. But at the same time, this is complete desecration of culture. It is. That because you have people actually digging people up over their grave robbing, taking information and taking things out of a sacred burial spot. That's wrong. It's wrong. Don't get me wrong, we get scientific data from it, but at the expense of we're messing with someone's ancestors. You know what I'm saying? And then I also wanted to add on to that too, about the people over there. When it comes to Egypt today and Sudan, you know, a lot of those people over there that come from ancient Egyptians are still there. They are. We just have a tendency we have a tendency to label them.
Right.
That's the problem. That's one of the problems we have. We have a tendency to mislabel them as Arabs or Ethiopians, but those people are still there. You know, the people that are originally from that land are still there. Some of them may have gone south a little bit, but for the most part, they still there. You know, they got conquered by history, but the people still they remain in that area. You know, it's not a secret. We got a brother on Team Osiris, brother Ahmed. DNA results, quite comprehensive, I might add. And he's almost 95% North African. This brother was born in Egypt. And he's not a sub-Saharan looking person like us. He's a fair-skinned brother. And it is what it is. You know, people are gonna not like that because in fantasy world, they want all the Egyptians to be sub-Saharan like us and resembling our phenotype, but that's not the case. It's not the case at all. You got people like the bees. These are tall, slender people, East African people. They still over there. They darker skin, but I mean, the people are still there. I don't get why people have such a hard time understanding that or having to make up certain rumors or make up things to support certain claims. But at the end of the day, we can't argue with genetics, and we definitely can't argue with people that are already there.
And you know what, Heru?
Yeah.
What's even funny is that, like, again, like, even experts that deal with ancient Egypt, the experts that deal with the language, they even tell you that the closest to the ancient Egyptian language are the same people that, you know, Brother Heru just mentioned, people like the Bija, you know what I mean? The Oromo, you know what I mean? Even modern Egyptians right now, they speak Egyptian Arabic. They don't speak, you know, Arabic, and Arabic has different, you know, dialects and things like that. They speak Egyptian Arabic. There's a book that I have that actually shows, you know, some of the same similarities in certain things, you know, that carried over from Coptic into Egyptian Arabic. You know, so like it's like why like we need to just stop playing these games. I mean, be proud, be Africans, but it's getting crazy.
Well, I look at it, Chris, as a culture war, because what a lot of people don't look at when you get African spirituality, something that I've observed and partaken in for a very long time. We see actions of people jumping around, dancing, wearing big masks, having vibrant colors painted on them, making sounds like animals and birds. All of this is modern day allegory. The European observed it and then condensed it and modified it for their culture. It wasn't that they were just stealing it. They were modifying it to fit their paradigm of relativity because it was older than them. And they saw establishment in it. They saw a cognate in it. So when you see like certain cave writings and things of those natures, those are cultural expressions. So there's an allegory to it. There's not a literary meaning. When in Africa, in certain parts of Africa, when they talk about possession, they don't say you are literally possessed. You are actually accepting into your mental the actual construct of a deity. But it's perceived as that because you're not part of that culture. You're on the outside looking in. It's going to look profane to you.
Right. That's like the genius thing. When you break down the origins of the word genius, and you know, it seems like it says someone is being possessed by a genie or you know, a jinn. but it's actually talking about the mental intellect of the person.
That's right.
That's ecclesiastical Latin for you. So it tells you who observed what.
Hey, look, and that ties into well, I've said it many times if people catch it, and a lot of the older esoteric people know this, that when they speak of angels and demons, they represent psychological aspects of the human mind.
And so this is clearly observed in Western Africa, heavily throughout the Yoruba and the Congo. So when we see this kind of activity, you also see it in the Nile Valley. When you look at the stories that are depicted on the walls, most of the things that are written on the walls of the popular tombs and things that have been exhumed are really hymns that are quite repetitious. There isn't a continuous story. You see a lot of pyramid texts. We've only gotten to the funeraries of the Kemet people. We have not gotten into texts that deal with everyday living, like a diary or a journal. We haven't gotten into that yet, because we've only excavated less than I think it's 0.9 to 1% of the entire Kemet region. That means we're still learning the culture of these people. But what we do know is they had a spiritual cognate to the other corridors within Africa. And that cognate was a highly spiritual form of allegory and metaphysical sciences that were then transmogrified into modern science in a term called philosophy. That is the cognate equivalent of African thought. It's just Europeanized, not stolen. Your history is still there. We know that white supremacy played a role in that. We understand that. But you also have a choice to not deal with it. Think about that. You have a choice to know your center when it comes to your knowledge base. It's right there for you to choose. So when someone says, well, this is stolen this and this is stolen that, you're going to have to prove that. It may have held water in the 90s. It may have held a lot of water. It would have made a lot of sense. But technology is speaking differently. That's why someone who's a PhD in history might take an opportunity to learn genetics to support their historiological findings.
Facts.
So you got to have a little bit more than just what's one facet. And one of our great teachers, Sheikh Anta Diop, had more than one skill set. He wasn't just a historian.
Even Dr. John Henry Clark himself.
Yes.
I mean, he instructed us out of his own mouth. I've seen the lecture several times. He said, study European history. Because within European history, you will find some African history. So even the great Dr. John Henry Clark is telling you not to remain stagnant or get stuck there. You got to go outside of that in order to come back in.
So this is correct, bro.
Yeah, we forget about that.
Can we take
also, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I wanted to throw something out there, Heru, that you mentioned before we close out. The misunderstanding, let's use this as an example, people. The misunderstanding of the Olmec cognate to Africa. We just for face value. Do you know that all human phenotypes, there are only a certain subset of them? And they're indicative to all races? Race is not genetic mixture. It's not skin color. Skin color don't denote race. Your genetics are your genetics. We are E1B1B. Here, we're not E1B1A. Genetically, we're not those people that we talk about in Kemet. That means a lot. I'm sorry, we're E1B1A. They're E1B1B. We're not a genetic cognate there. So we have to pay close attention to that. Because if the genetic cognate happens to be in West Africa, where you come from.
Exactly.
We got it, it's going to be some tough conversations to be had, but you're going to have to get around it. You can't say you a scientist based on what fits your paradox. If we deal in physics, there's your proof right there. Go ahead, brother.
No, I was just saying, when we dealing with science and genetics, people have a tendency to cherry pick only pick out the information that fits what they trying to say. But if you're gonna be honest and unbiased with the information, then you got to let it all out, because the truth gonna stand alone.
That's the problem right there. They don't want to let it. They don't want to practice full disclosure.
Yeah.
And that's part of the issue that I have with a lot of people teaching in the community, man. It's like I try to stay out the way, but at the same time, I look at my Facebook timeline, I look on YouTube, I check things out every now and then, I hear certain things, and I'm like, wow, the people that's listening to this are letting these people get away with this stuff. It's because they're in agreement with it. They don't want to go against the boys club. You know what I'm saying? Or the girls club. And peace to the panel. The brothers and sisters, man. Y'all was making some powerful commentary. And I was listening in, I was like, man, y'all was hitting on some points. I was like, I got a call. The one brother, Naomi, asked excellent. Naomi, he asked an excellent question. And about, Greek civilization being a blueprint or a model that the Europeans can look to and use, And then I think Chris came back and said, well, they don't go extreme with it. You don't see them dressing in togas or running around, except when they do their little rituals, for Greek fraternities or what have you, but they're not walking around. They're living in today. You know what I'm saying? And I want to say, like, we should look to Kemet as a blueprint in a sense, but we can't become romanticized when we look at it, because in 2016 we preach we need to come together. I've been hearing people since Donald Trump won the election, we need to come together. This is the time Black people need to come together, and this and the third. No more black on black violence. Let's not take advantage of each other. Let's not rob each other. This is what we hear. But when we look back at ancient Kemet with all of its greatness and all the feats and all the marvels, the centralized government that they developed, we forget the other side, that somebody had to suffer, somebody had to be oppressed, somebody had to be exploited for them to reach that greatness. And I have that discussion with anybody, and I've had that discussion with the best in the community. You know what I'm saying? As far as the people, the cultures, the other cultures in that region that had to suffer for the elite farmers to reach the greatness that they did in ancient Kemet. And I'm talking about
that would be the majority of the population of ancient Kemet that had to suffer for that.
That's what I'm saying. I haven't even spoken on the common people yet, and that's great that you brought that out, sister. But I'm just speaking on the region that had to suffer. The Nubians had to suffer simply because up under their feet was gold. They had gold reserves. They had gold mines. So guess what? Where at one time we were having mutual trade, now I need that what you got up under your feet to be the lifeblood of my economy, so that I can control parts of Canaan or the Middle East and parts of Europe with this gold that I can now trade for other products that I need from all these other regions. So when you had the initial unification of Egypt, this was just a consolidation and taking control of the trade routes, so they could control everything that was coming in and out of the Nile Valley. And they created a system based upon that just ran perpetual until they became, and they imported more than they exported. They started importing more. They started importing the mercenaries and bringing more people in. Kind of the same thing you see in America. And you start to see the downfall of it, after about 1000 BCE. But I'm just saying, they exploited people. They suppressed people. They subjugated people, not only the common people within the country who were illiterate, as the sister Nefakar said earlier. They had a 1% literacy rate with the common people. They couldn't read or write. Not saying they were dumb, because we know that, my grandfather, he wasn't the highest educated man, but he got a job in the plant. He was able to function. He was able to make a good lifestyle for himself. He was a skilled tradesman. He could fix anything in a house. But if you ask him what kind of, how far did he go in school, he didn't go too far. And I know a lot of other older brothers, some of them have passed, some of them still living, that weren't educated. They had a 3rd grade education, 5th grade education, you know, dropped out in middle school, you know, but these are, how many skills did they have? So you had a lot of skilled tradesmen among the common people, but these weren't the brightest people, the most highly educated people. And they got it taken advantage of. If you look at, you know, the brother, it's so much to cover, man, but the brother Kansu brought up the pyramid text, the coffin text. The common people didn't even have access to that stuff originally. They didn't even, only the elite people had that. This was floating around amongst them. And then once they said, you know what, we can use this to make money off the common people. You could purchase attributes for the afterlife.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, so originally the common people didn't even have access to Osiris.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I'm saying? The mediator between the underworld and if you want to say heaven, how we equate it nowadays. You know what I'm saying? So I think we have to consider all that when we look back at Kemet, and because I've talked about this in the past, Team Osiris has talked about this. I know Ngozi has spoken about this. You always get frowned upon. You get looked down on. You're called anti-African because even though you're cool with the mainstream individuals in the community, you can't talk like that because you're going against everything, the foundations that they have built, because they're still, as they say, standing on the shoulders of the ancestors, meaning Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakananan, and all these other individuals that Kansu mentioned. And I think we don't like to talk about the ugly side of Kemet. You know, there's never been a good government in history. Yes, they have been great if you look at it in terms of their building projects and how they were able to organize the people. Well, if that's the case, why do we talk about America so bad then? You know, they're doing the same thing.
Right.
Look at the monuments in Kemet. The majority of the monuments are symbols of the rulers. They're basically construction projects that the rulers orchestrated, put their foot on the necks of the common people who died with twisted spines, crushed limbs, crushed hands, kicked over in the grave in the desert somewhere. And everything I'm saying, I can prove it with scientific articles and facts. So challenge, call me out. We should be calling each other out. If I say something, don't let me just get away with it. Call me out on it.
Yep.
That makes me go dig in my bag and show you this, which will make you look at it so you maybe can start to see it from all sides. Instead of us looking at it like, Kemet is the blueprint. If Kemet is the blueprint, stop ending, we should end black on black violence. No, we shouldn't then if Kemet is the blueprint. Because in order to have the haves, you're going to have the have-nots. Somebody got to suffer for us to achieve greatness. And that's black.
Hey, brother. Hey, brother Nazir, they don't even want to talk about how Egypt colonized the Nubians, and the Nubians have their own deities, their own burial rituals, and the Egyptians said, nah, you're going to follow our gods, our deities, and bury your dead like we do ours.
Yep.
Completely uproot their culture, remove their identity, and say, look, you're going to be part of us, therefore you got to act like us. You got to get rid of everything else that you once had.
And to let you know, they were a whole separate culture. They had their own identity. They had their own language. They couldn't even understand the metal netter. What the hell is this?
Right. Yep.
Right. They had to use interpreters to deal with the people from the South.
Hey, look, you know what's crazy too with the whole, like the question with, well, Europeans, they look at Greek as classical civilization. Again, I said, well, there's a limit to it. Here's a big ass limit. All right, you got the Berlin Papyrus. I was speaking with Brother Consu about it earlier. I think it's line 195, the test of fertility. And it says that this case describes another method for determining the fertility of a woman who has not yet given birth. Her private parts are to be fumigated with hippopotamus dung. If the woman urinates and defecates or feels flatulence, she is considered fertile. If she feels nothing, she cannot have children. So, you got to have limits with this shit. You know what I'm saying? You can't just romanticize all this. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So.
And they learn from people dying when people started dying, and people started getting diseases and different things like that, they say, you know what, this ain't working. Like for the first 3 dynasties, they practiced ritual sacrifice. In some graves, as many as 300 people had to die when the pharaoh died. His whole house, all of his servants, guards, they all had to go die with him. And this is Soy Kiata's research.
Yep.
There's also documentation to back that up too.
Hey, look,
Yeah,
that lasted up until at least the 3rd and 4th dynasty.
So yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like trial and error. It's like we read this stuff and like, wow, yeah, you know what? Let's do this. This is traditional stuff. This is our stuff. Where these people even stopped doing this damn stuff because they realized they were in error. They weren't doing it right. And then we look back at it and we want to apply that to today, which is crazy. And this is the romanticism that we talk about.
Yeah.
You know, it's like even Dr. Faraji. I question his latest video. That's very popular on side of the TV right now. The brother makes so many errors. You know what I'm saying? And when I put up in that post, I really didn't hit with the hard hitting stuff. But my point in that, in challenging that, was to show that, you know, you had mounds and tumuli all over planet Earth. You had people, the brother Consul brought up Nabta If I was asked half these cats, well, who was that Nabta? What cultures? What groups? I mean, I could imagine what they would tell. Oh, these was all Africa. These was this or this was that. You know, it's like that when you put them, that's what I'm saying. We have to start being specific. And when I get cats in these conversations and they start being specific, I ask Jonathan, I ask Ankh, and I have these conversations with them. So I'm keeping it real. I ask them, I say, what Nubian group came into Kemet and established Kemet? I say, was it the A group? Was it the C group? Was it the B group? Who was it? They can't answer. These are your greatest scholars in the community, can't answer me. They can't answer me. What do that tell you? They don't know what they're talking about. They're sticking to the script of they came from the South. The same rhetoric we get from when we pick up these books from the 70s and 80s of, you know, if you want to call it Afrocentric or whatever, it had a purpose at one time. But it's limited. It's a limited worldview. You had Africans going, if you want to say Africans, people from the region, people from the continent, people from the Nile Valley, going over to Iberia, going over to Arabia and for refuge, and then coming back into the continent. You had several groups, maybe 4 or 5 cultures might have been not applied. People from the Middle East, people from Iberia. People aren't really studying, man. That's what you really see. So you find yourself in arguments and stuff like that. And it's hard to give an answer in just a little Facebook post. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because it's so complex. When you start talking about the Capsian culture that brothers on the panel bring up, you know what I'm saying? The Ibero-Mauritian culture. All these cultures played a part in the Nile Valley. The Proto-Mediterraneans, we don't even talk about these people that were all along the coast of North Africa, that were high yellow, light skinned, if you want to call them pre-Europeans, proto-Europeans, proto-white, whatever you want to call them. You know what I'm saying? These people, if we would look at them today, we would say they aren't Africans at all. At all. But these are some of the people that were in the Nile Valley in Kemet. The earliest relics, the earliest images in Kemet look like Asiatics. If you go look at some of the palettes and some of the labels from pre-dynastic, first dynasty, second dynasty, these are big nose. The same people that Narmer is squashing out, is stomping on those palettes were the original indigenous inhabitants.
Hit it right on the nail, right on the head.
You can't run from that, man. And people like to run from that.
I'll tell you, Nazir, that when you talk about pre-dynastic Egypt, they avoid that, man.
They avoid it because
they
don't
even want
know
to go
what
that
they're
route.
talking about, because it'll break away from what their master teachers taught, and they can't expand beyond that. They stick to the script. If you go back and listen to all their old videos, they talking that they come from the South stuff. They don't know what the hell they talking about. They don't understand Nubia at all. It's not until you ask them a question that they run and scramble and get the information and try to come back and give you a half-ass answer. And then they appeal to authority and just say, "Well, I gave you an answer, bro. Who are you?" Then it turns personal. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not gonna play the favoritism game at all. You know what I'm saying? I told you I still, like I said, the lines of communication with me and Ak is still open. Every now and then, it's been a minute. You know what I'm saying? He might call up a couple other cats we build, but I go at them. I challenge them the same way I would challenge anybody on Team Osiris. It ain't a favoritism thing. It's about the information. But I feel that Team Osiris is more fair in their approach to ancient history, historical information, and science. It's not the narrow-minded view of the way Afrocentrics push their agenda. And that's why I support Team Osiris.
Definitely. And y'all all pointed out great points. And what it boils down to is the scientific method. The scientific method always shows us that something can only be 99.9% true. You can never have a definitive this is the end all be all. Because as Kansu said, we have only scratched the surface of the history of Kemet or the Nile Valley period. So by scratching that surface, we can't have a definitive answer of who these people are, what their culture is, or anything. We have to develop this over time as we use anthropology, as we use you don't want to leave any stone unturned. So every method that we can use, we will develop a rigorous method to figure out the actual answer. And still, after we figure all of that out, it's still not 99 point. It's still only going to be 99.9% true, because we are not here talking to those people. You know what I'm saying? We ain't gonna dig up the dead and restore somebody and and talk to them and ask them what the actual customs were of that day. So we only guessing. This is guesswork, basically. So what we're doing is taking a scientific approach. Afrocentrics or any centrics. You know what I'm saying? You can be Afrocentric, you can be Eurocentric, you can be whatever century you want. That has a narrow-minded view. You already answering the question before you even did the scientific method to prove the point. So this is what Team Osiris stays away from. And this is why I'm Team Osiris, because this is my view. We have to take a scientific approach to everything. We have to know that science always changes. We can find out something tomorrow that can turn our whole view over, and we'll be like, wow, they wasn't even these type of people. Right. So even though I've always loved Kemet, you know what I mean, I had to get away from that romanticism, because that romanticism itself, the word romanticism is Roman antics. This is a Roman cultural thought. This is not African to romanticize something. So we're going to stick with our indigenous thought process, our African thought process. And that is to be observant and to be scientific. And we will stick with that. I'll say Ashe and yield the floor. Peace and love, family.
Ashe. Ashe. That's some powerful information. That's a powerful statement. And like I said, it's a new day. And we encourage everybody to take an opportunity to learn your culture, and understand that, culture is going to trump academia 95% of the time, unless you got a certain culture that's ignorant of themselves. Very rare. So,
I.e. the African American.
Right. we're the only culture that we truly don't have an organic culture. We have a continental culture that, we didn't have much say-so in. And that's a whole nother argument. And, it's a reason why we have a hard time assimilating information. Go ahead, bro.
The thing is, if we knew who we were, or most of us, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want anybody to get it misconstrued like we disrespecting Kemet or we disrespecting the great teachers that came before us. But, from my perspective, I love Kemet and I love my ancestors. So much so that I'm willing to advance their work and I'm willing to focus on other things that's going to advance the people in general. And, I don't want anybody to get that misconstrued like, this discussion is just shitting on Kemet. No, it's not it at all. My whole thing was even making that post is to just explain something so simple. Hey, we know who we are, or most of us do know who we are. The cracker has never hid this in history. They've always told us who we are. We just the ones who running from it, and we don't want to be what we are. That's the thing. So we want to run and jump on every other train that comes through the station. But at the end of the day, we West African, and there's a whole nother side to that continent that we are not studying as much as we should be. And I'm saying, hey, let's shift the focus and see what's going on over here with the people that's there. There's a lot of connection that needs to be made with those people. And that was my thing. And
I don't think it's really shitting on Kemet. I mean, it's telling the truth when you have a centralized government. I mean, I looked at the surveys, bro, and I'm gonna tell you the way the commoners died, man, was pitiful. Like I said, twisted spines, crushed limbs. They died horrible deaths, and they were kicked over in the dirt desert grave at the end of their lives after building up their country. When you look at the Corvée system, CORVEE, it's basically slavery. It's your whole household is forced to go out, the men and the women, mainly the men, the fathers, forced to go out and serve. I don't care what your age was. Old man, yeah, still get your ass out here in this hot sun and build up these construction projects for free. And if you don't want to do it, you could, your son could replace you. But somebody from this household going, or y'all going to do it, you're basically doing it by force anyway. You're going to jail and you're doing it by force anyway. That's slavery. If somebody told you to do that, came to your house today and imposed that on you, you would swear it was slavery. This is what they did. People keep talking about the pyramid workers. When Zahi Hawass came out, I think 2004, it said these pyramid workers were treated fairly, see? And they weren't Israelites. His whole goal was the Arab versus the Israeli thing. So there's politics involved in Egyptology and Israel Antiquities Department. This has been going on forever. But come to find out, those weren't even pyramid workers. They were actually soldiers. They had nothing to do with the construction of the pyramids. But people don't look at the revised article that came out. They look at that and still talk about that to this day. The information has been upgraded. So you can't even use that anymore. These people weren't treated fairly. The commoners were not treated fairly. They keep talking about the free healthcare and all this, man. Really, really look into those workman camps and really see what was going on. Like I said, it's another side to Kemet. And if you support the government, that government structure in Kemet, then stop talking about black on black crime in America or anywhere else. Because those niggas that's out here robbing and stealing, they trying to get theirs so they can get on top and be the elite. That's how the elite in Kemet got theirs. How did they get it? And I'm just throwing this out there to the listener. How else did they get it? That's how they got it. They took it. They took what they wanted. And once they got it, they tried to keep it in the family. If they could have had it their way, the same family would have ruled forever. Think about that.
Hey, that's why we have records of incest. That's why we have so many physical. That's just
Man, they would have ruled
dysfunctions.
forever, man. That's why you had so many uprisings, because the other elite families was like, wait a minute, you've been ruling for 60 years and now you're trying to let your son. No, hold up, man. Let me get in here. I want my family to rule.
Right. Right. That's why they had incest, to keep it in the
To keep it
family.
in the family. If they could have had it their way, the same family would have ruled forever. But that was the system. That system. So I'm against that system. Now, what system I'm for? Nazir Lee, how could you be against this great African empire? What system are you for? What system do you suggest? The pre-dynastic system is what I suggest. Study that. Where it was free trade, open market. The people from the desert could come drink of the water, pick up the grapes, and live their lives. Everybody got along, even before the 42 nomes. But let's look at the 42 nomes that Kansu brought up. Everybody got along, everybody traded, everybody worked together, everybody respected each other. You had nomarchs, you had local regional rulers. You respect my authority. You got your flag, I respect it. I got my flag, you respect it. We respect the water, we respect the land, we respect the territory. As soon as somebody got the bright idea, some nigga came up with the idea of, you know what, I want to control the trade markets. Let's take this shit over. And that's what they did. Excuse my words and how I'm wording it, but I'm just being real about it. This is what they did. We sugarcoating it, man. We making it sound all special. Unification. You know, unification and this and that. Man, they took over the trade route. Period. And they tried to keep, and they made sure that they kept control of it. They set up the system, they put the system in place. Prior to that, everybody was getting along. They stunted the growth of the same Nubians that everybody keep talking about. Netanyahu put up the picture of the Nubians. Everybody keep talking about these dark-skinned Nubians. Well, I tell you what, Kemet, the Egyptians, the elite families, don't get it twisted. I'm not talking about the commoners. I'm talking about the elite. They stunted the growth of the Nubians, of those cultures from the south. Because once they made everything about gold, they didn't care about the rights, the sovereignty of these other people. They went in there and crushed them. They put up forts at Buhin in the first dynasty, second dynasty. And they made sure they kept people, slaves coming in. They kept making sure they went down there taking all their cattle and everything else. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, man. I'm not.
That's why some of those Kushite farmers left. A lot of the Kushites left because either they were fighting against it or they just decided to move further down south. Man, because of
they couldn't even trade. Look at these people. They're living.
They have enough power to fight back.
They still living like they was living back then today in a lot of those countries because they couldn't advance. They had them boxed in. They couldn't trade with the rest of the world. Imagine that. I cut you off from, you've been trading with the Mesopotamians. You've been trading with the Indians. I got evidence. I got surveys on that. They was trading with the Dravidians. They cut them off from all that trade by boxing them in, keeping them suppressed, dwindling their numbers so low that these cultures almost became extinct in an archaeological record. What surveys are you brothers looking at? Not nobody on this panel. I'm just speaking out in general. What surveys are people looking at? These groups almost became extinct that we're talking about. If you didn't want to succumb to subjugation, they got rid of you. They took your children, brought them into Egyptian households, raised them up so that these children were thinking that they're now Egyptians. You know what I'm saying? Still having some idea of, wow, I look kind of different. You know, and maybe having some idea of their history, but they are what you call Egyptianized at this point. And that's what Netanyahu put up. Egyptianized non-indigenous groups.
Hey, Nazir, it's crazy. Like, a lot of people need to realize is that, and this is the best way I can interpret it, is that how Europeans would go and colonize other parts of the world, the Egyptians did the same thing.
Exactly the same. It's exactly
they did the same fucking thing. They colonized certain parts of Africa, you know, what we would call like certain parts of Sudan, Nubia. They even colonized certain parts of the Middle East. In fact, in cases like why in like late Egyptian language, you know, you'll find Semitic words like the word for chariot, Merkaba. You know what I'm saying? Even in Hebrew, it's still Merkaba. You know, you'll find this exchange of words. The reason why you can tell certain aspects of Medu Neter is that you actually have ancient Egyptian words found in certain documents written in Semitic scripts. You also have a certain Egyptian priest that could write in certain Semitic scripts like cuneiform and Akkadian and things like that. You know, so the colonization that you see that Europeans did, you know, Africans did the same shit.
Yeah, you have to understand the language of your subjects. Those you're subjugating, you have to open up the lines of communication. They know they're conquered, but you have to have a way to communicate with them. And people forget this. People forget
that's how you
infiltrate.
That's how you infiltrate the society.
Yeah, people forget this.
That's how you infiltrate.
That the Canaanites actually could speak Medu Neter. They couldn't write it in a lot of cases, but they could speak it. And I think we have to ask ourselves, why weren't all these groups, and this is a different conversation, even using the Medu Neter at this point? They could speak it, but they weren't using it to write with as a writing script. A lot of these groups were bilingual, but they had no need for the Medu Neter. It was almost, in a sense, to them like an archaic, an older language. In a sense, it wasn't as useful to them. It's almost like when shorthand came out in the 80s. It wasn't faster.
It wasn't practical. It was no longer practical
for everyday use.
Medu Neter and Sanskrit were both the lingua franca at the time. So you had to know those two to do trade. So they basically conquered by that. They conquered by being that lingua franca. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't develop a lingua franca by being a passive people. You have to actually go and conquer for people to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get down with your culture. No, you just don't do that. You know what I'm saying? Off of no friendly thing.
1 second,
so
guys.
Our best evidence is the my namesake minutes. You know what I'm saying? The Narma palette. Those were back migration people from the Levant. That were living, but he went and slumped out. He slumped them out and created this new sub-Saharan Egypt, if we want to say. But by conquering the lingua franca, ended up establishing itself across the Middle East, or what we call the Middle East today, and as well as the Mediterranean.
Before we get, we actually coming to the end of the show, and I want to kind of save some of this discussion we having for the next installment, because this is a subject matter that's going to go across a lot of finite subjects. So, because we want to show a cognate of the propensity to conceal argumentative information that affects the subjugative actions of some of the people that really depend on certain people in this community for information. So that's why this is so important, particularly the relationship Western Africa, the Sahel, Sub-Saharan, and the Maghreb region, how Africa happens to be 13 million square miles of history. And there was history going on while there was history being made with the Nubians and the Badarians. There was still history. Understanding that we as a Black people are uniquely affected by a very unique diaspora when we came into North America from Central in Southern America. We are special, believe it or not. The world looks at Black people in North America because we set the tone. And because we have no cultural base in Northern America, we have an assimilated culture, which gives us a propensity to fall for anything that gives us any sense of belonging, because we're mentally attached to conspiracy theorism that puts us in a state of euphoric thought. The more non-religious we are, the more religious we become. We replaced the cross for a book. So with that being said, anyone on the floor has a closing statement, but we will have another show coming up very soon, audience. But does anyone have a closing statement in regards to the matter?
Yeah, I like to
Not
add.
at all. I just
Oh, go ahead, Mel.
okay. I was just gonna say, when you want to look at Asian culture, when you want to look at history, try not to be so romantic with it. Try to look for it as they are. You know, we should get to be human. You know, people are human, so they're gonna do things that are human like. They're gonna have falls and they're gonna have upsides, and we can't forget that. Kemet is a perfect example of that. They were human, so they capitalized where they could, and the rest, you know, is history. So that's all I really want to say.
No
Can
doubt.
everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, I would just like to say peace and love to the family first and foremost, and to everyone watching. And I think everyone made good and valid points. I would just like to add that, in my opinion, that if we're going to be able to move forward and progress in our endeavors to change the plight that we find ourselves in today, that it is necessary to be able to approach the situation in a non-biased way. And so it's not necessarily about particularly attacking anyone or any ideology or any groups, but that we have to do the things that are conducive to our purpose, and we have to nullify any recognized agendas that are antagonistic and oppose doing just that. And that's my piece.
Oh yeah,
Peace.
yeah. This brother Heru. Before we close out completely, Council, I think we need to properly introduce the new members of the team. My brother Meech and our brother Heruel. Just give the brothers a short short part to go ahead and speak on who they are and what they like to do.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, this is Hero L, or you can call me Hero Jones. My particular interest is basically the utilization of meditation as it relates to the psychological abilities to change our behaviors in order to escape many of the sufferings that we find ourselves in. Because I think it can be easily recognized that today, in today's society, that us that are so-called blacks here in America definitely still suffer from many psychological predispositions that have been imposed upon us through the struggles that we have found ourselves in due to the European influences upon our ancestors. So
Yep.
I just want to say that my specialty is in being able to provide practical and scientific methodologies that will allow us to do just what I spoke of before, and that's escape the suffering and progress as a people. And I wish that it would be able for everyone and all the groups to be able to do this as a total collective entity, if that were possible. And it may not be possible. I'm not saying that it is or it isn't, but as of right now, it doesn't look like it's necessarily possible. But I just hope that we can move forward and come together and progress. And that's my piece.
No doubt.
Very powerful, brother. Very powerful.
Did the other brother leave?
Brother Menace.
Yeah,
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 he dropped off.
Yeah, he
yeah,
dropped.
dropped out.
All right, I'd just like to say real quick, salute the new members, Heru and Menace Beach. To the listening audience, it's Nazir Lee. The reason why I study ancient culture is just basically to find strategic ideology within these ancient cultures to put and to add that with our modern experience, what we're going through right now, because you have to have a sense of history, so to say. Every culture on the planet studies their past. So I don't want to be the type of person to forget all that stuff. We don't need to talk about any of that. No, we can talk about it, but it's the context by which we talk about it. And so at one time where I was religious, at one time where I was romanticized, I'm no longer that. So I try to put everything in context, and it helps me in my modern walk, my strategies that I use today. So, and I try to help other people do that, whether it be from the Bible, whether it be from Kemet, whether it be from Sumeria, whatever it might be, you know what I mean? To try to just give clarity, context on how we should view these ancient cultures, their literature, their archaeological information, and so on. So, like I said, I would like to try to aid Team Osiris, be in the behind the scenes context, you brothers and sisters that are part of Team Osiris. You do an excellent job on the live broadcast. I don't know if any other shows you brothers and sisters might have on Blog Talk or what have you, but from what I see, at least with the YouTube, you do an excellent job. So with that, I'd just like to say peace to everyone.
All right, all right. Well, I'll see about the chat. Everyone really enjoyed the conversation, and we tried to be as informative as possible. Once again, those of you in the conscious community, keep your own mind intact. Ask the tough questions, and never compromise your logic. Have proper knowledge, understanding, and wisdom when dealing with this information. Watch out for conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories are very dangerous, man. Very addictive. So, it's okay to discover conspiracy theories, but leave them as a theory until they're proven more than that. And with that being said, with Team Osiris, Khonsu Shesh Mamun, we out, family.